Welcome to Speakeasy Spirits. Have you ever gone into a bar and ordered your favorite cocktail and it was perfect, and then later you find yourself at another bar, order the exact same thing, and you get something completely different? That's because the smallest changes can have a huge impact on cocktails. So today I want to show you some of the little things you can change as we try to dial in one of the simplest cocktail recipes and see if we can find your perfect old-fashioned. An old-fashioned is about as simple as it gets. It's just whiskey, sugar, and bitters. Of course, the biggest impact on the flavor is going to be your choice of whiskeys. Traditionally, an old-fashioned is made with either bourbon or a rye. These are both going to make two similar but very different drinks. Most bourbons are going to have notes of brown sugar and cherry, while a lot of ryes have a peppery, more herbal finish. And then come the bitters. This is just a small sampling of what's available. So what I want to do is use different combinations of these bitters and sugars and see how we can fine-tune the recipe so you can find your perfect old-fashioned recipe. Let's start with a bourbon old-fashioned. Now every bourbon is going to be a little different, but usually they have some notes in common like brown sugar and cherry. So let's focus on those flavors and pick some bitters and sugars that'll complement them. When I think cherry, brown sugar, first thing that comes to mind is a cherry cobbler, a cherry crumble. So let's add some black walnut bitters. For our sugar, we could use white sugar, brown sugar, demerara, but I'm thinking we play on the nutty flavors of the walnut and go with an almond syrup. This is orgeat. This is my homemade syrup. So let's start with 2 ounces of bourbon, a 1/4 ounce of orgeat. Now you can adjust this to your own particular tastes. If you like it a little sweeter, you can add more. If you like it a little drier, you can add less. And then our black walnut bitters, we're going to add 2 dashes. Now we'll add 1 large cube of ice. And we'll give that a stir. Now a square glass with an oddly shaped cube is not the easiest thing to stir. I probably could have chose better glassware for this one. And since we're going with the flavors of a cherry cobbler, let's garnish it with 1 cherry. There you have a cherry cobbler old-fashioned. It's sweet, it's nutty, the bourbon still comes through loud and clear, and you get those brown sugar and cherry notes. It's still very clearly an old-fashioned, but it's got a little something extra. So this is just one way you can fine-tune your old-fashioned. Let's try another one with bourbon. For this one, let's make it in our mixing glass. Once again, we need 2 ounces of bourbon. Now we need to choose our sugar and our bitters. I want to focus in on the cherry note of this. I'm thinking a chocolate-covered cherry. So we have here some Angostura cocoa bitters. We're going to put 2 or 3 good dashes in there. Now for our sugar, let's think a little out of the box. Instead of just using a boring plain white sugar, let's use the syrup out of a jar of cherries. Now, bar spoons are a little small, so let's put in at least 2 full bar spoons. Maybe 2.5. Now let's add our ice and give that a good stir. Now we are trying for some dilution here. We want some of the ice to melt. We also want to get it nice and cold. An old-fashioned is really a sipping cocktail, so you want to have it cold enough that if you take your time drinking it, it won't be warm at the end. Now let's strain that into a glass with a large rock of ice. Let's garnish with a couple of cherries and just a little bit of orange peel. We'll zest that over the top and drop it in. There you have the chocolate-covered cherry old-fashioned. That is cherry all day long, but it's surprising how just a couple dashes of chocolate bitters really bring forward a chocolate note. It really does have the taste of one of those syrupy chocolate-covered cherries that taste a little bit alcoholic. Now both of those do come out a bit on the sweeter side. If you like something a little drier and more savory, let's try a rye old-fashioned. Just like with the bourbon, the flavor profile of a rye can vary between brands, but you're typically going to get pepper and spices. So I want to build on the spice notes of the rye and see if we can build a Christmas spice cookie old-fashioned. We're going to build this one in the glass, and that's because we're going to start with a granulated sugar. Now I want to make sure that any undissolved granules stay in the glass and not in the mixing glass. I'm going to use a Demerara sugar. This has some molasses notes to it, and I think it'll work really good in a Christmas spice cookie recipe. Let's do 2 heaping bar spoons. And since we're building on those spices, we're going to use the Angostura bitters. This has cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice. Let's add a couple of dashes right on top of the sugar. Now we'll add 2 ounces of rye. I'm using this Rittenhouse Bottled in Bond. This is 50 proof, so it is a little stronger than a lot of others. But the alcohol burn isn't overpowering. I think this will make a really good old-fashioned. Let's add an ice sphere. And let's give it a stir. Now one thing you'll notice when you're working with a granulated sugar in a cold drink like this, you're not going to get it all, and there will be some granules left at the bottom. That's okay. This is going to evolve as you drink it. It might start out a little drier at the top, and when you get to the bottom, that last sip's going to have some undissolved sugar granules, give you a little pop of sweetness. It's a nice little treat at the bottom of the glass. Now for our garnish, orange is always a classic on an old-fashioned. So let's cut a nice long strip of orange peel. We'll express that over the glass. Drop that in. And then to build on those spice notes, let's also garnish it with a cinnamon stick and star anise. There you have our spiced Christmas cookie old-fashioned. On the nose, it's all cinnamon and orange. It smells really good. This is a little drier and closer to a classic old-fashioned. If you wanted something sweeter, I'd add another bar spoon or 2 of sugar. You do get all of those Christmas baking spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, and allspice. Just the slightest hint of orange, but none of that covers up the peppery notes of the rye. It's a really good cocktail. And for the last old-fashioned, I really want to play on the pepper and herbs of the rye. So let's start with 2 ounces of our rye whiskey. And to sweeten it, let's go with this Rosemary Sage Simple Syrup. This is just water and white sugar that's been infused with rosemary and sage. We're going to go with about a 1/4 ounce here. Again, if you like it sweeter, you can add more. Now for our bitters, if you really wanted to build on those savory notes, you could use a celery bitters. But in this case, I want to use some Peychaud's bitters. This is one of my favorite bitters. And we'll add 3 good dashes of this. Now you can also do combinations of bitters. So let's add 1 dash of cherry bitters as well. Now we'll give this a stir. And strain it into our glass. And for our garnish, this would be great with a sprig of rosemary, which I don't happen to have. Maybe even as a smoked cocktail. But we're going to keep it classic and go with the orange and cherry. And there you have our Rosemary Sage Savory Old-Fashioned. This is good if you're a fan of less sweet, more savory cocktails. It's very spirit forward. The rye comes through loud and clear. There's a pepper note, the spices, the herbs. You get a hint of the rosemary and sage. So if you're a fan of a savory cocktail, this might be how you dial in an old-fashioned to your liking. What I wanted to show with these 4 cocktails is that you can really dial in one recipe to your own tastes. When you're at a bar, don't be afraid to call out your favorite brand of spirit. You don't have to drink the well liquor. And don't be afraid to ask for variations. If you want it made a specific way, ask for it. And it's okay to experiment. Feel free to try an old cocktail in a new way. I hope you liked the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. By liking the video, you'll really be helping us out. We'll see you next time.